Going Down Fighting by LeilahMoon. Read by Mabella. Chapter 17. Hermione and Narcissa ended up missing much of the Quidditch match as they talked, and she couldn't quite believe it when Narcissa promised to look into whether there was anything more that could be done for her parents. When they eventually turned to the game ahead of them, they saw Draco hurtle towards the ground in a perilously fast dive, the third-year seeker trailing hesitantly behind. Jerking suddenly to the left, Draco leaned forwards, hand outstretched. Hermione gasped as he appeared to wobble slightly before rightening himself and just managing to close his fingers around the small, struggling snitch. The entire school erupted into raucous applause as Draco held up his hand and flew slowly back down to the ground. It was an almost perfect end to the match. Although the third years had come second, they had still beaten the eighth years in terms of number of goals scored. Draco quickly became surrounded by a crowd of people, all eager for a glimpse of gold. Leaning against his broom and looking far too attractive for his own good, Hermione couldn't resist hopping down from the stands to go and congratulate him. The moment he saw her, he stepped forward and cupped her face with his hands, brushing small circles along her soft skin. She was surprised when he quickly lowered his head to capture her lips with his. "Well done," she murmured, leaning against him. The group of eighth years nearby paid no attention, already aware of their relationship, but Hermione noticed a few glances and whispered comments from other students as they filed out back towards the castle. She caught Ginny's eye, who, frowning, walked over. "Did you hear what they were saying?" Hermione nodded as she turned to her friend. "Apparently they're querying whether I really am the brightest witch for being with Draco." "I heard them mention that Malfoy's using you in an attempt to rebuild his social status," Ginny added. Draco came up behind Hermione, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Damn it, Granger," he smirked. "I had hoped you wouldn't find out so soon." Ginny snorted. "You could have made it a lot easier on yourselves if you'd chosen a less challenging witch to improve your status." He laughed, nodding solemnly, and exhaled a long-suffering sigh. Hermione glowered at both of them, elbowing Draco in the chest for good measure. "It's just so frustrating," she lamented. "They were cheering your win not 20 minutes ago." Draco shrugged. "It doesn't matter. They'll get bored and move on to something else in a day or two." "Hopefully," she muttered. "Oh, I forgot to mention," Ginny piped up again. "I'm meeting Harry in Hogsmeade tomorrow, and he asked whether you two want to join us for a drink." Draco tried, but failed to hide his grimace. "How did you know that was exactly how I hoped to spend my weekend?" The redhead smiled sardonically. "Yes, we would love to," Hermione said, ignoring the glare he sent her way. "Great," Ginny replied, and as she walked away, called quickly over her shoulder, "Ron's coming, by the way." Draco groaned. "Fucking fantastic." The next morning was unreasonably cold. Hermione and Draco braced themselves against the biting wind as they walked into Hogsmeade. Despite the heat of Draco's arm around her and the numerous warming charms they had cast, she was still shivering. "It'll be fine, absolutely fine," Hermione muttered. "We'll have a great time." The comment was intended for Draco, but really, she was trying to reassure herself. "Maybe we should turn back," he offered, smiling innocently. She glowered at him. It had been a few months since Ron had accidentally stumbled across her and Draco holding hands, and he had barely spoken to her since. She felt small and childish, as though she were back in third year again when he refused to talk to her because of Crookshanks. Pulling herself from these ruminations, Hermione looked around the bustling street. Chattering witches and wizards moved from one shop to another, clutching bags and holding tightly to small children. Every breath showed itself as a plume of white steam. "Are you sure you don't want to go into tomes and scrolls?" Draco whispered enticingly. "I can hear the books calling out to you." Hermione's eyes glazed over slightly as she stared longingly at the storefront he was pulling her toward. Long rows of dark oak bookshelves embraced hundreds of meticulously organized books, and the flicker of floating candles was almost hypnotizing, imploring her to just take a quick look around. She shook her head, trying to convince herself that she absolutely did not need the newest edition of Spellman's Syllabary. "Come on, let's go over what we discussed," she said firmly, and Draco knew he had lost. Sighing, he recalled her rules for the meeting with Harry and Ron. "Be boring." Hermione rolled her eyes and corrected. "No aggravating or sarcastic comments. Next, don't be a dick." Those weren't her exact words, but she allowed it. "Anything else?" she prompted. Draco paused, striking his chin dramatically and pretending to think deeply about his answer. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes again. "If no one dies or suffers any grievous injuries," he swallowed, pupils dilating. "You wear that lingerie set I'm particularly fond of this evening." Hermione blushed. This time, those actually were her exact words. She hadn't been entirely sure how he would take to bribery, but as it turned out, it worked extremely well. They had arrived at the Three Broomsticks far too quickly, and Hermione peered through one of the windows. She could hear the crackling of fire and feel an inviting warmth radiating from the glass. Harry and Ron were already seated in a booth towards the back of the room. They had spent together in deep conversation. She smiled, wondering whether Harry was giving Ron a similar list of rules to the ones she had supplied Draco with, minus the lingerie, she assumed. Hermione turned to Draco, gripping his hand more tightly. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," he replied, and bent to brush his lips against hers. Ginny was stood ordering drinks as they walked in. It appeared that she had charmed the new bartender to serve her fire whiskey, despite not yet being 18. Draco quickly filched a glass, gulped down its content, and ordered another one. "That keen to spend the afternoon with us, hey?" Ginny laughed, passing a drink to Hermione, who shook her head. Levitating their drinks to the table, Hermione greeted the two boys and settled into a worn armchair. An uncomfortable silence swelled, and they all pretended to be intensely focused on something around them. Hermione stared determinedly into the foam of her butterbeer, watching the small bubbles rise and fall. Ginny gave an exacerbated sigh, glowering at each of them in turn. "You're all ridiculous. Someone's got to go first." Shifting uneasily, Hermione looked at Ron. "I'm sorry you found out about Draco and I." He cut her off, leaning forward in his seat. "So it really is Draco and I now, is it?" Draco stiffened next to her. "We're together, if that's what you mean," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I'm sorry I hadn't told you before. I wanted to." "How long has this been going on for?" "You could just let her speak," Draco muttered under his breath. A crimson stain was beginning to spread from Ron's neck towards his cheek. "What did you say, Malfoy?" he snapped. "I said that you should let Granger speak. You keep interrupting her." Ginny exhaled heavily from across the table, which prompted Hermione into action. "Okay, this doesn't feel very helpful," she reflected. "Ron, I know you don't like this, but it's what I want." "Hermione, I just want you to be happy, and I don't see how he," Ron jabbed a finger in Draco's direction, "could do that for you." Hermione could see Draco clench his jaw in an effort not to retort. Despite his impressive ability to conceal emotions, the small smirk, the nonchalant way he reclined against the sofa, she could sense the tenuous grip he currently held on his temper. He does, Hermione said, reaching for his hand. "I'm happy, Ron, and he makes me feel safe. I don't jump and reach for my wand the moment someone surprises me anymore. My body isn't constantly tense, preparing me to run or fight, and the nightmares are almost non-existent now." There was another silence as Ron contemplated his response. She caught Harry shooting her a sympathetic smile as she looked down at the table, avoiding Ron's gaze. "I need time," he said eventually. "I still don't get it. I can't just forget everything he's done." Hermione opened her mouth, but Ron continued. "I'm not mad, though. You're my best friend, Hermione. I've missed you." She smiled weakly, relief flooding through her. "I missed you too." Ron turned to look at Draco. "But if you do anything to hurt her, Malfoy, I will destroy you." "You can help Harry, then," Ginny said, beaming. "He's already preparing his Don't Hurt Hermione speech." "Send me know when it's ready," Draco drawled. They continued to make peaceful, albeit slightly forced conversation for a while until Ron appeared to decide that he had tolerated Draco's presence for long enough. He said his goodbyes, even managing a glance in the former Slytherin's direction. The moment he was out of earshot, Hermione gave Harry and Ginny a piercing look. "Fat lot of use you two were," she huffed. "But you were doing such a good job," Harry said, grinning, as Ginny chipped in. "We didn't want to intrude." Draco pulled Hermione to her feet and looked at the other couple, Ginny practically straddling Harry's lap. "We'll leave you both to it," he smirked, as Hermione leaned over to give them both a hug. "See you soon, and don't be late, Ginny." "Potter?" Draco nodded. "Weaslett?" As they walked out of the pub together, Hermione whispered, "After your restraint this afternoon, I think you deserve more than just a lingerie." He had never hated the Hogwarts anti-apparition wards more. Chapter 18. The months seemed to pass rapidly after the inter-house Quidditch match. The bitterly cold winds of February melted into March, and flowers began rearing their heads again. By the time May merged with June, the dull mornings had transformed to ones of light and warmth. Unfortunately, these changes also signaled the beginnings of exam season, which for 7th and 8th year meant preparing for newts. Renowned for being the most challenging exams a witch or wizard could take, Hermione and Draco had 7 each to sit. Draco sorely hoped whatever career Hermione ultimately decided to pursue, she would never again have to take an exam once these were over. Her usual academic neuroticism had increased tenfold, and he was certain he'd develop whiplash as a result of her abrupt mood swings. He tried to ease her burden by providing an endless supply of tea and sugar quills. Alongside the pressure of revision, Draco was also awaiting the outcome of his probation period. Despite her exhaustion, Hermione stayed up with him night after night as he relived every moment of 8th year, wondering what might count for or against him. Their final exams were particularly long and arduous. Professor Vector had set 5 complex arithmancy questions. The heat from outside had seeped into the usually cool great halls, and beads of sweat trickled down Hermione's face. She could feel the coils of hair spring free from her bun as she moved her quill feverishly across the parchment. As the 10-minute warning was announced, she grit her teeth to get through the throbbing pain in her hand and wrote a final 5 inches. When the well reverberated, calling the exams to a close, Hermione felt a sense of melancholy wash over her. This would be the last time she ever sat in the hall to take an exam. In fact, she would soon cease to be a student of Hogwarts at all. Draco was waiting for her in the entrance hall, with a somewhat dazed expression across her face. "How did you find it?" she asked. He shuddered. "Well, let's just say it's a good thing I have no burning desire to become an arithmancer." Opening her mouth to begin reviewing each question, Draco quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her out into the sunlit grounds. "Granger," he implored, "I love you, I really do, but please can we not go over every single detail just this once?" Her brow furrowed in confusion at Draco's side. "Let's talk about it over dinner instead," he suggested. When she beamed in response, he knew why it was that he could never refuse her anything. The cloudless sky housed the white summer sun, and Hermione's skin tingled pleasantly as it absorbed the afternoon warmth. "Where are we going?" "Where are we going?" she asked as Draco steered her across the grass. "Just down to the lake. I thought we could relax and bask in the knowledge of finishing our formal education." She hummed appreciatively. "I guess we do deserve a break." Having chosen a quiet spot, they lay facing each other and listened to the gentle splash of water as it lapped against the grassy shore. "What do you think you'll do?" Hermione asked hesitantly, "if you get the grades you want?" It was strange, she thought, awaiting his reply, that they hadn't had this discussion yet. On her part, she could admit she was apprehensive about how he might respond. This was an entirely new stage in their relationship, both dating publicly as well as beginning to navigate the future. "I think I'd like to become a potioneer," Draco mused. "There are quite a few apprenticeships being advertised at the moment, but I'm not sure which to apply for." "Why not?" "Well," he paused, softly tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb, "I need to know what you're going to do." Her heart fluttered. "Oh?" He murmured. "So what is it that you'd like to do?" "Something within the ministry, I think. Ultimately, I like to be promoting SPEW. Ultimately, I'd like to be promoting SPEW and other activism projects, but I know I need to work up to that. I suppose it's just deciding what the best route might be. I've been wondering about taking a position within the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures." Draco nodded. This didn't come as a surprise. "And where would you live, do you think?" From the rough tone of his voice, Hermione knew he was leading her somewhere, but she didn't want to presume anything in fear of being left disappointed. "Well, Harry did mention I could have my room at Grimmauld Place back if I wanted." "And? Do you want it?" I guess I hadn't really thought about it," Hermione murmured, aware that this was an outright lie. She and Draco had shared a bed for the last year, and the thought of living separately to him after graduation made her feel somewhat nauseous. "Hermione Granger not consider such an important aspect of post-Hogwarts life? I find that hard to believe." "Well, what about you?" she asked, hoping the pink tinge across her cheekbones wasn't too noticeable. He licked his lips nervously. "I want you. I want to live with you, and—" "Yes!" Hermione interrupted before he had a chance to finish, her breath shifting, the white blonde hair layered across his forehead. "Yes, I want that too." Draco's eyes lit up, light grey sparkling in the sunlight, and his face transformed into a full smile. It was the kind of smile he used to give freely up until 6th year, but the more things had changed, the rarer they became. Her heart clenched as she covered his face with tiny kisses, knowing that if she ever owned a pensieve, this would be one of the memories she treasured above all. To be continued. Thank you for listening to Going Down Fighting by LeilahMoon, read by LeilahMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.